Right. What's up, everybody? This is Joe
Gio, Ed
from Pissing Razors, and you're watching Aftershocks TV.
baby.
All right, welcome everyone back to another episode of Aftershocks TV at AftershocksTV.com on the CMS network. And both Tom and myself would like to welcome our guest on today's episode. We got with us bassist Eric J. Morgan. He joins us today. Thanks for coming on, Eric. What's going on, man? How are you?
Yeah, doing great. Doing great. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Of course, man. Well, Eric, I mean, normally when I do an intro to the episodes here on the show, I tend to do a little brief, overview of the background of our guests and music. But since, man, you're handed so many different bands and projects over the years, it would have taken me probably like 5 or 10 minutes to go through everything, So yeah.
I try to stay busy.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So this one I just decided, you know what, we're going to introduce your name. And then we'll go through everything one step at a time because we definitely got, a lot of stuff to talk about, which is really cool. And I guess we'll start things off, Eric, with what you've been doing most recently, which your involvement, which was one of my top 5 records of last year, 2023, which was the sophomore release from Patriarchs in Black, My Veneration. I know you played bass on a handful of these songs, I believe, and
Yeah.
Right, yeah, and of course, Patriarchs in Black, just for the listeners and viewers out there that don't know, features obviously drummer Johnny Kelly, who is, of course, mostly well-known from goth metal icons Typo Negative, and he's pretty much the drummer behind every other band on the planet right now. I mean, Quiet Riot, Kill Devil Hill, I mean, it goes on and on. Yeah, and of course, Patriarchs in Black is also Dan Lorenzo. I mean, Mr. Dan is one of those guys, and I know, you obviously know this, Eric. It's one of those guys that's just become this insane. I tell him this all the time, every time I interview Dan, just this master riff maestro. I mean, he's just cranking out albums left and right these days with, Patriarchs in Black, Cash is King, and Vessel of Light.
Yep.
Yeah,
right.
I mean, you go down all of it. And I believe I saw too that the guys they're getting close to wrapping up the 3rd record too, Patriarchs in Black. I saw too, man.
He's not sitting on his ass, he's really cranking stuff out. He does. He writes stuff, and he and Johnny go back and forth, tighten it up, and then it's like, hey, you want to play bass on this one? Yeah, sure. They shoot it over, and those guys don't rest.
No, they know, man. So are you going to be involved with the new Patriarchs in Black at all?
Yeah, I played on a track already. Yeah, I did one for them, shot it out. It's got working titles, so there's no, final title because there's no lyrics or anything on it just yet. So it's just got working titles. I don't even remember what this one. I think it was called Quickly. I think that was the working title of that song. Yeah.
Oh, very cool. So how did you get involved with Johnny and Dan? I mean, obviously Johnny, I knew you guys were both in, a Pale Horse Named Death, correct? So
yes.
Is that how you guys know each other, or did you guys know each other go way back, or
Yeah, I've known Johnny a long time. Yeah, it's It goes back to like the Brooklyn days, mid '80s. Like '85-ish, when I started playing in this band First Order back then, and playing a lot of local shows. It was like scene was a little different than I guess you would say now, and because it was more like brother bands, and everybody was always trying to hook each other up, help each other out. And Johnny and Kenny were in a band called Hellraiser. And it was Kenny Hickey and Johnny were in that. And I remember at some point it came up, and they wanted to get on a show at Animal Hall, and we had kind of juice there, even though we were like kids. And we were like, yeah, put these guys on the show. Like that kind of is what started, me knowing Johnny. We didn't hang a whole lot back then, but we were always in each other's company, and playing shows, things like that.
Well, and Tom sent me something yesterday that you mentioned to him too, with you and Johnny, that you guys, you obviously have worked on now a bunch of projects, but one that's pretty interesting he told me about was that you guys had created some music with none other than Living Color vocalist Corey Glover, correct? Tell us about that, and are those songs ever going to get released to the public anytime eventually? Yeah,
I'm actually, it's been on my to-do list for forever, and it's things, pop up and all that, but I'm currently mixing all that stuff now. And I got a new recording system, which is kicks the ass of the old one I had, and it's sounding so much better. So it was kind of maybe divine intervention that it took so long for it to actually happen, because it's going to really come out. It's going to sound so much better than it would have sounded on my previous system. Plus, with what I've learned, you know, over the years and during the whole COVID lockdown, when I really dug into recording stuff and mixing stuff, like more so than I had in the past. I've been doing it, you know, recording in my bedroom since I was a kid, you know, on 4-tracks and things like that. But now it's so much better. And this stuff with Corey is killer. You know, it's covers, but it's really cool covers. Like, you know, stuff I've been wanting to do, and stuff that, because Eddie Heedles is involved in that too.
Okay.
And stuff that he brought in. He's like, hey, we should cover this. And I'm like, hey, that's a good one for Corey. Yeah, that sounds like that. We could probably do something cool with that, you know.
Nice.
So yeah, that should be like a nice little EP coming out. You know, again, and then in the middle of mixing it now. So
very cool.
Yeah.
Sweet.
Yeah,
hey, Eric, I mean, just for the audience, obviously doesn't know that, you know, you and I have got a history, and I'll tell them briefly about that. Is your wife used to work with Kirsten, right? I always get Kristen and Kirsten mixed up. Kristen, thank you. I work with a Kirsten. So Kristen and I used to work in the same company. She's the kind of person that I would gravitate towards. We were just chit-chatting and got to know her a little bit, and we're talking about music. I can't remember what the discussion was, and then she mentioned Pale Horse Named Death, and I went, hang on a second. And I picked up my phone. I go, like, you mean these guys? He said, yeah, my husband plays this. Get the fuck out of here. He does not. So and I, being a big, huge metal fan, I was immediately drawn to the conversation. And then Eric and I texted, we kept in contact. We had a couple of beers back in Jersey a few years ago. And then when Matt actually said, because, you know, we did our, as everybody did in January, the top 10 of, you know, 2023. And Matt had Patriarchs in there. I says, I know the guy. And he says, say what now? So this whole just opened up the conversation to having you on tonight to talk about it. And, you know, based on the subject matter that we were going to go through, I have got 8 or 9 questions to try and squeeze into 30 minutes. I could have had 30 questions. So I've got to start somewhere. But, you know, on that Patriarchs album, first of all, it's a phenomenal record. Just and I have it, you know, Matt and I we share the love of that album. We genuinely do.
Awesome.
But that version of Kashmir on that is honestly, first of all, when I saw Kashmir, I was going, well, God, another Kashmir, really? Do I need to hear another one of those? But goddamn, you guys nailed that. And the singing, the voice on that song is just off the chart. Tell me a little bit about recording that and just his voice and his presence.
Oh God, Jimmy Necco, he's amazing. Like he's always been amazing. Like, you know, I met him. We both worked in the same piercing shop back in Jersey and Hawthorne. It's Pleasurable Piercings. That's where I met him, and he was just so freaking talented. It was so obvious that the kid, you know, he's a star. You know, he's just had it. You know, he's the real deal. And when I heard he was singing on it, I was like, wow, we finally got on a song together. Like, it took 26 years, but we're finally on a song. And they came up with wanted to do Kashmir. Johnny asked if I wanted to do bass for it. And I was like, yeah, absolutely. It's like my favorite Zeppelin song. So sure. And then I was like, hey, do you need strings and keys and all the orchestra stuff for that too? And he's like, yeah, I had somebody in mind. What, you want to do it? And I said, yeah, I do that stuff all the time. So that was a lot of fun, a lot of work, but totally, like, you know, me getting the horn section stuff in, like, finding it in tablature and crap like that, and then translating that to the guitar, and then going, okay, and then playing it on keyboard and getting that stuff together. It took a long time, but when it was done, I was like, holy shit, this sounds.
Yeah,
I was so happy with how it came out. Like, you know,
I wasn't even looking forward to hearing it because I heard Kashmir, the song, and then all the versions, and I just put on my headphones and then just took them off and went, "What the fuck did I just hear right there?" Because it was seriously that good. So,
awesome.
So
Thank you.
what's happening with Patriarchs right now? What's like 2024 looking for, even into 25?
I think they're just still doing the third record. Now they're in the middle of that. I think that's supposed to come out in this, like, October or something.
Okay.
It's like, I think it's coming out, like, you know. They're not resting on their laurels. It's just, you know, they're coming right out, you know. So I think that's really it. I mean, there's no, like, shows or anything planned because it's kind of tough with logistics and with how busy Johnny is, because there's so many different people, you know, brought into it. it makes it tough to be like, okay, who's the singer for this? Because each person brings their thing to the table that makes each song they're on so special.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, I get that. And what about like obviously we got a couple of projects I want to jump around on because I want you to tell us what you're doing. Tell me a little bit about this Alice Cooper Solid Rock Foundation. That's that caught my attention.
Yeah. That's one of the guys who did he sang on the my Veneration record, The Dead and Gone. It's Bobby Jensen. He does this thing called Almost Cooper. He does this huge, like, real big production, like rock shows stuff, and it's freaking impressive. You know, they nail it. And he asked, he's like, "Hey, you want to work on this?" Because he and I heard him sing Dead and Gone on the Patriarchs record, and I was like, "Who is this guy?" And like, you know, they gave me his name, and I kind of connected with them. Told him, I was like, "Hey, you know, think he did a great job. He's got like that snotty 70s rock vocal, you know, that I love and kind of miss. Like he's got he doesn't sound like Bon Scott, but he's got like that attitude like that I like about Bon Scott. If you know, it's like kind of the vibe, very 70s snotty rock, and I dig that. And he ended up reaching out to me, asking me if you know, I'd be interested in doing a track for this benefit record. Like it's an LP coming out for the Alice Cooper's Solid Rock Foundation, which is like they do stuff for kids. Like, you know, they can come in and learn how to do whatever. You know, like he has everything covered. It's not just music. It's pretty rad. And yeah, we did. He asked if I would do it. We're doing Black Widow, or the Black Widow. And I asked Bob Pantella, who I've been wanting to work with for a long time, he's drummer for Monster Magnet. I asked him because he and I have been, you know, saying, "Oh, we should get together. Oh, we should get together." You know, like over and over. I was like, "Hey, he's perfect for this. Let me get in." Because Johnny, I was gonna have Johnny on it, but he did something already for it. So I was like, "Okay, let me get, you know, let me get somebody else in here." And asked Bobby, and he was totally down. You know, he did it. And then I brought in Oscar Lowy from this band Vintage Caravan from Iceland that we played rocking with.
Great
you heard them?
Oh, I love them.
Great band. Killer band. Like, you know, all of them are monster players. And yeah, I've been wanting to work with him since we played with them at Wacken in like 2014. Like it's on the poster. I have the Wacken poster hanging right there, and I see their name all the time. And we were next to each other, like in the tent artist area. And we just kind of talked, but nothing really heavy, you know, not too deep. We just kind of chatted. And then we played Damnation Festival in 2019 in Leeds. We were sharing a dressing room. And I was like, all right, somebody's telling me. Yeah. Because I was like, I was like, wow, these guys are killer. You know, he's a great guitar player. I really want to do something with him. And like I said, when that happened in 2019, again, like saying divine intervention, something's, you know, made that happen. I was like, somebody's saying like, you need to work with him like that. So I asked him and he jumped right in. Yeah, did it. Freaking blew my mind. Like, you know, can't wait for you guys to hear that.
When is coming out, Eric? When is that on release?
That I'm not sure because I'm not on that side of it. Like we're doing the song for it, but there's, I think it's fairly soon. Like they're gunning for it to be soon, but I don't have a timeline for it though.
Okay, sweet.
Fortunately,
sweet.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But it sounds killer.
Yeah, and Bob Pantella, I mean, not just Monster Magnet, but also Atomic Bitchwax, drummer too, one of my favorite bands. I mean, killer. He's a great drummer, and that's what's kind of cool, you know, just in general. I mean, you know, I was talking to Dan about this. I talked to a few guys about this, you know, in Jersey, you know, you've got like sort of like those guys, you know, there's like that sort of, I would call it the Jersey crew there, where everyone really kind of just like, you know, you have the Monster Magnet and Atomic Bitchwax always help each other out, fill in for each other all the time if someone can't go on tour. You know, it's such a good little group of this. Steve Zing obviously has his thing, you know, with Johnny. You know, it's just, you know, and like you said, you're a Brooklyn guy, right? So originally, right? So I mean, and I know like, and so when I grew up in Queens, and you know, I remember, you know, grew up in New York. For a little while, I worked at, you know, over at Roadrunner Records there for a little while, and you know, I was involved with the hardcore scene, the metal scene, and everything. And even though, I mean, both obviously, you know, New York and New Jersey are so, you know, they're right next to each other, obviously. But it always felt to me like, you know, the musical circles was sort of, at least back in the '90s and so forth, was sort of separated. You know what I mean? It was like there was really kind of two different scenes that didn't. I mean, you never really saw too many Jersey bands coming over to like Queens and Brooklyn, and you know, a lot of bands from Queens and Brooklyn did go over to Jersey, obviously. But you know, it's interesting. I mean, what's your? I mean, just from coming, I think from you know that side now being in Jersey and being around these guys. Like I always said too about you know New Jersey and the difference between like New Jersey and New York was that you know New Jersey, New York, when it came to like metal. It wasn't really the best sort of metal town. Brooklyn had great metal, but you know Queens and Manhattan was more punk oriented. But you know you wanted,
Right.
but Jersey really had the metal. You know Jersey and upstate New York to me were really the places where you know metal was more prevalent. What's your take on that? I mean, just being from Brooklyn and now living in Jersey. What's your and being in all these bands? You know, you in hardcore bands. I want to get to in a second, but talk about like what you saw growing up about really metal in New York compared to you know the outer boroughs, you know the New Jersey and upstate and so forth.
Well, out of like for Jersey, I mean, we had some bands coming over. I mean, like Dan with Hades and
Oh yeah,
Nonfiction.
true.
You know, they're Jersey guys, and
Yeah.
I can't even tell you how many shows that First Order we shared bills with. You know, but we're a little. There's like maybe 5 years between us in age. So
Okay.
at that time, like, you know, there was no way Dan was hanging out with 16-year-old me. So we never hung out. It's just because that's like an eternity, like 5 years difference, you know, from 21 to me being 15 or something. But Hades was always playing around Nonfiction, you know, Jersey guys. Blessed Death was another one. I don't know what happened to them. I really dug them. They were Jersey guys. They came in. We saw that a lot, but metal wise, for the scene, we were in that really nascent thrash scene. Like it was still pretty freaking new when we started, like, you know, when First Order started up. And I was playing with other guys, you know, in this band Subjugator, you know, with guys who ended up being in First Order later on and things like that. So it was always, you know, you had like Carnivore, you know, huge local heroes, you know, Christ, who else? Chaos, Kaos. Guy Anthony Asty, Beast, you know, on, you know, Beast bass player, like, you know, kind of like a mentor of mine, helped me out a lot too. Geez, I can't even, I'm trying to think of other, like the old head guys that, like, you know, we looked up to. I'm just drawing a blank.
Sure.
But
Yeah.
it was more like, there was a lot of like a bigger thrash thing going on in our area. And then it started to get kind of crossover-ish. We had bands like Leeway and stuff. I think they're New York guys too, maybe Queens. I don't think they're from Brooklyn.
Yeah,
so I saw a lot of like thrash bands and stuff coming up and like hardcore bands and things like that. But it was there was always a pretty big metal scene. You know, it's just it all started to kind of turn on its head a little bit. Honestly, I think a lot of that had to do with like Metallica wearing like GBH shirts and Discharge shirts and stuff. Because then a lot of metalheads were starting to get into like crust punk, you know, and then that got into like them more like the Exploited, which is more like straight up punk, you know, and things like that. So that stuff started to influence a lot of what was going on, which is where, you know, I think you get some of the Biohazard stuff from, like where it was like they were really mixing all that stuff plus some kind of hip hop kind of vibe in their stuff and like some dub stuff, even like going on, like some reggae-ish influence without it being obvious, you know. So I think it became a real cool melting pot of that style, you know.
Yeah. No, it definitely did it. You know, and that was the thing too in the 90s. You know, like I always said, you know, a lot of the bands in the 90s, we're going to talk about, you know, one of the bands you were in, Lament, because that's, you know, totally remember you guys. I remember the Levitate record that was out on Too Damn Hype Records there. I know that was the Philly label that was signed a lot of New York hardcore bands. But it was interesting how a lot of bands, because that was a very interesting, like you said, time, because you had, obviously, you said the crossover thing was starting to kind of die out, still hanging on a little bit, but you had all those urban influences coming in with, like you said, Biohazard and Madball and so forth. But then you also had kind of what Lament was to me was you guys had more of that alternative, you know, angle to your sound, a little more the post hardcore, post metal sort of alternative angle.
Yeah, definitely.
So yeah, and so I mean, like you said, it was band. You know, I mean, there was a lot of bands, especially, you know, it was like Into Another and Orange 9mm. I mean, like you said, it was all this sort of coalescing of, and it was a great time because I love that you can go to I would go to these hardcore shows, but it wasn't necessarily that all the bands were hardcore. I mean, you had Candiria that was like jazz influenced, and then
Oh God, yeah, Kill,
right?
Great band, yeah,
great band, yeah,
great guys
it
too.
was, yeah, and you guys, you like I said, but Lament, were you guys, you had that record. What had happened to the band? I mean, you guys were making some noise, and then it just kind of did. You guys just kind of disband? You could talk about Lament a little bit there.
Yeah, that I was on the 7-inch that came out, the Drowning Room 7-inch. I did that with them, and then things just changed, for me in life, and I ended up moving to Florida.
Oh, okay.
And like to Miami. Then I was like producing salsa bands for a while, which was a trip.
Oh, wow.
But that's something else. That's another story. I was coming back for shows and stuff. Like I'd fly back and do stuff, and then it just kind of I ended up moving upstate New York, and then I kind of just ended up leaving it just because of the distance and stuff, and I was just learning to drive because growing up in Brooklyn, I didn't have to drive. I have buses and trains everywhere, so I learned how to do that there. And it kind of just fell away, and I was starting to get into doing other stuff. Like I was getting more into like industrial and things like that, and like Ministry and Nine Inch Nails, so I was kind of going in another direction. So it's like, I wouldn't say I outgrew it, but it's just my focus and my headspace was in a different spot. Even though when I heard Levitate, I was like, wow, this is freaking great. Like, and I would have loved to have done that, and been a part of that too. It's just, you never know. It's like hindsight's 20/20.
Sure.
But yeah, I think it just kind of, faded. Maybe. I mean, again, I could ask Joe Affey and John Scantato for how it actually finally, like disbanded or something. I'm not exactly sure.
Okay. Yeah, I was just curious. Well, speaking of Joe Affey, so I think Tom mentioned me. You also were in Maximum Penalty for a bit. Is that?
Yeah, it's kind of like when Lament they were becoming. It was like out of Maximum Penalty, becoming Lament. So I was never really like I never gigged with Max Penn. It was like the crossing of that, and then it was like Lament like that.
Okay.
So and the sound was changing. It was like you said, more post hardcore, kind of sound, as opposed to being like straight hardcore.
Yeah, I always loved Jimmy Williams' voice. I mean, I always thought he had one of the best voices in hardcore with Maximum Penalty. That's just one of those bands. Their last record was great. Life and Times was one of my great. Yeah,
records. I just got that. Joe sent me a copy.
Oh, really? Nice.
Nice.
Yeah, traded him the first order, but not traded him. I sent him the first order one as a CD as a thank you, and then he got back and sent me some bunch of vinyl, and Life and Times was in there as well. That's a great record.
Sweet.
It is. Now, you mentioned before First Order.
Yeah.
Like you said, thrash band out of Brooklyn there in the 80s. Tell us a bit about that band and why. I mean, that I guess now I'm hearing that you're going to be remastering, releasing some of those songs. It's like about 40 years old or so, right? I mean,
the oldest one is 36 years or 38 years old. The first demo, something crazy like that.
Wow. So what made you now at this point in time be like, you know what, let's go ahead and let's re-release all these? Have you had a lot of interest from people that wanted to see you release those songs?
Yeah, there were a bunch of people. I mean, that's another one that was like the Corey stuff. It's been on my to-do list for again forever. And I did have a few people that were constantly like, come on, man, what's going on? Because I had like for the first demo, I had a decent copy that somebody had. I don't remember who the hell I got it from, but I did a tape transfer of that. I had that in my like digital files of like a nice the highest res I could get off a tape deck into my DAW, and had that. And then I had from the guy who did our recording, he had all the session files of everything. So we had the individual bass, drums, guitar, vocal, tracks. And for the second demo, he had done some other remixes that I asked him about, and he found them. This guy still had these tapes with all this stuff. So he sent that to me, and I just said, now it's the time. It's time to get it out. And I've had a friend of mine, Mike Barrett, was like harassing me to put it out. He's like, my tape is shot, and I really want to hear more First Order. And, I had my friend Mike Scandato, John Scandato's brother, and he's from Inhuman, and
Newman, yeah.
The Last Stand and all that. Yeah, he was like, dude, when are you going to put this stuff out already? You know, and like they were kind of the ones putting the fire under my ass. On top, I mean, I wanted to do it, but it was just kind of like, you know what, let me just fucking do it, you know, get it done.
Yeah.
And it came out great. You know, my wife and my friend Lisa Soretta, they got together and did a killer layout. You know, we got like, I kind of had an idea of what I wanted it to look like and talked it over with the other guys in the band and said, hey, what do you think of this? And it just kind of came together pretty quick. It was like a flurry of activity, you know, getting it done. And then when it was done, it was like, holy shit, it's really done. And, you know, had Faster and Louder Records, which put out some of the Patriarch stuff. I had a dialogue with the guy there, and I said, hey, I got this band, you know, I was in the 80s up until 91. And we want to re-release our stuff. You know, would you be interested in putting that out? Because I saw that he had stuff kind of like that on his site. And he was like, absolutely. And I was like, wow, that was easy. All right, cool. You know? And then it's just, okay, then I really, that put everything into super high gear. Because I'm like, wow, it's going to happen. You know, so now I got to really get it done, you know? So it's like, I was kind of chipping away at it and playing around with it. Then it was like, okay, now it's nose to the grindstone, get it done.
Yeah.
Get it out. And, and that came out and it moved, and we were pretty blown away by how many people actually, like, I was kind of like, is anybody going to fucking remember who the hell we were? And stuff like that. Like, you know, it's like, God, I hope this guy doesn't make these like 300 copies and then we sell 2. You know, or something. Yeah, I don't want to look like a dick. So it just kind of, again, we were just impressed that people said such nice stuff about us and, you know, remembered us so fondly. And it was just really amazing, you know.
You said that to me in a text, because I knew that when, you know, when I have you on here, that yourself and Matt would go like hyper local, like local bands and local whatever that a lot of people may not have heard of, or they heard the name, they're not really sure what the origins are. So I knew that I was going to sit back and just, you know, be the third mic kind of thing for this one, and I'm totally okay with that, because it's your scene from your time back then. And you said that on a text to me last night about First Order, about that you didn't appreciate that how influential potentially First Order are. So are you getting asked, like we're asking about it, Matt's obviously knew the scene back then, but are you getting, you know, when you're in the conversations, not necessarily on podcasts, but just in the music conversations about First Order and their origins? And is that surprising you as to how you were just this band back in your day, finished in 1991 or whatever, and here we are all these years later having a conversation about it?
Yes. To me, to all of us, you know, we were just really surprised, you know, just very surprised. And, you know, hearing stuff like Alan from The Life of Agony, he was like, oh, I loved you guys. I was in the pit for you guys all the time, you know, and
that's great.
You know, just hearing that stuff and being like, oh, wow, you know, because when I had met Alan a bunch of times, but we hadn't really connected until I was really in A Pale Horse Named Death. And he was kind of like, so how do you figure into this? Like, how did you get in this? And I was like, oh, I said I was in First Order. You know, and that's how I know Sal and Johnny and all those guys. And he was like, wait a minute, you were in First Order, you know, and I was kind of like, oh shit, wow, okay, he remembered us. You know, at that time, that was like 2000, was that 2011? You know, when we first started talking about it. But yeah, it's funny to hear like people, like one friend of mine had said, he's like, yeah, you guys were Meshuggah before Meshuggah, you know, and stuff like that, because it was it was real time signature, you know, kind of stuff, like kind of tricky-ish stuff. Without it being obvious, because our drummer always kept like the China going and the snare, but with his feet he was doing something else. So we'd be playing in 5/4, but people just latched onto the you know, the China and snare, and it was it kind of grooved. And we had like a big skinhead following, we had long hair followings. There was never any problems at our shows, like, you know, it was,
wow, that's a rarity for back then, you know.
Right. Like, you know, and we kind of got away with it. You know? I mean, now I'm like, you know, I shave my head now, but we were wearing Fred Perry's and Doc Martens with long hair, and nobody fucked with us, because they were like, "Oh, well, those guys are okay. Like, we got to pass,"
Nice.
I love it. I mean, there's nothing like going down those trips of yesteryears. And I said this to you, Eric. We were just chatting last night. He said it's like a couple of guys at the bar just having a beer, shooting the shit, talking about whatever. But fast forward to today. I know you're working on a new punk project. Tell us a little bit about that one.
Oh, which project? I'm sorry.
A new punk project.
Oh yeah, that's with that's with Mike Blanks from Blank 77.
Mm-hmm.
That's it's probably going to be called The New Stupid. I think that's what we're going to go by. It's it's just another thing. It's like I met him through. I had heard of Blanks, but I didn't realize that was him. I worked for this pharmaceutical place in Elizabeth back in like early 2000s. And I had like a Motorhead, he had a Motorhead shirt on, and I had a Fred Perry, and he was like, "Nice shirt." And I was like, "Likewise." And then one day we just ended up talking.
Yeah.
And I said, "Yeah, I met this guy, Mike Blanks." And my wife went bananas because she loves Blank 77. She's like a punk rock chick. She's real into that.
Okay.
And I just asked him, I was like, "Hey, you want to work on some stuff?" And that started to happen too. And then, I wrote a bunch of songs. I have like 7 or 8 songs, and I just got to wrap up the Corey stuff, and then I'm going to have him come in here and finish his vocals, and that'll come out too.
And is it straight up punk? Like, what should we expect when we hear this?
It's pretty punky. It's pretty straight ahead, but it's kind of like I wouldn't call it pop punk, but it's catchy and it's hooky, but it's still really nasty and like got a nasty edge on it, so it's not like, it doesn't sound like Green Day. Not that I have a problem with them, but it's not like that, but it's hooky because Mike doesn't sing. Mike just sneers, so, and it works. And then I yell, I back him up and I'm just yelling, blowing my throat out. And that should be out fairly soon too. That's going to be out this year. I'm sure of it.
Fine. We'll have to have you back on. You're doing so much projects. We got to have a recap in a couple of months to see where you're at.
Sure. Yeah. I'm always doing something. I'm always trying to stay busy, even if it's not even this, if it's weird sound design shit, I'm doing that too,
Now with a Pale Horse named Death, I mean, it's one of those bands. I mean, like I said, I love, what Sal does with his music and stuff. But I know he's just always going through different band members, left and right. I mean, and I know, unfortunately, he's been in, the news lately, not for the best reasons, Yeah, I mean, what's up with Sal? I mean, like, in terms of like, is he, I mean, I'm not trying to get you here to talk any crap about him or nothing, but I mean, like, I know he's kind of challenging to work with, is what I hear from, 1 or 2 people who've worked with him before. But I mean, let's put it this way: is there a reason why you're no longer involved with, is he the type of guy that needs to kind of have different guys in and out of the band with that band just to kind of switch things up? Is that his MO with Pale Horse? Because it's such a great, band. It really is. Yeah,
I mean, I'm real proud of what the band did, and we did do a lot. It was together for like 10 years. And there's a decent amount of stuff. He's I don't really have any ill will towards the guy. I mean, I've known Sal since we were 16, and we used to hang out all the time. He was in a band, Toxemia, back in the day, and we used to play a lot together. It just he's again, I don't want to talk shit, but it's like he's just kind of a little tough sometimes to deal with. And then after the last run that we did, I was just kind of like, what, there was an incident, and I had said to everybody else, like, after this, I'm done. I'm done with this. And it just became that. And then Johnny was like, yeah, I'm done, and then he left. And then I think Eddie left, but then Eddie's doing some like solos and stuff for him, but I don't know really what else is going on. I haven't actually talked to him since I left. It's just, I've seen that there was a lot of meltdowns and, my friends, cause I can't see anything that he's doing on Facebook because he's blocked me. So I don't see anything, which I'm not looking.
Sure. Yeah.
But I get the intel from like my friends. They'll be like, it's not every little thing. Like, oh, look, Sal went and got a hot dog today. Oh, like they're not telling me that. They'll be like, oh my, they'll tell me when something's really, the pot's boiling over and there's a catastrophe. They'll be like, oh my God, what's going on with him? I'm like, I don't know. You know, you know more than I do. You know, and then I'll get screenshots of things and be like, holy shit. Okay.
Wow.
You know?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he's a fucking talented guy and he's got
he is.
really good vision. He's just got to stop shooting himself in the foot, you know, and like, that's like the worst thing I can really say. You know, it's just a lot of self-sabotage almost, and it's unintentional. But
sure,
you know, it's just
you'd often hear people like that like they're in their own way. You'd often hear that saying right there. So, and I can appreciate. I know people like that personally, not in the music biz, but so. And I got just another question. Are you still, when you talk about, look, you've jumped around, Eric, on different genres and scenes and timelines, and obviously, you know, you lived in, you know, New York, Jersey, now Florida. You said, are you still clued into like the overall rock, metal, punk scene? Do you like for me, I'm a huge rock and metal fan, so I'm jumping on Blabbermouth every day and Metal Injection and Brave Words, seeing what albums they release. Oh, the new Saxon is out, the new Priest is out. This guy's touring with that band. Just bought a ticket last week for Symphony X, good old New Jersey band.
Yeah, I remember that name.
Yeah. So I'm very much clued into the scene because I'm a fan. Matt and I just do this to shoot the shit. So as you're getting older and going off for different kind of, you know, different ventures and life takes you different directions, are you still clued into what's happening in the rock metal scene, or you just jump on board when something catches your eye?
Usually, I mean, I keep on top of what's going on. I check out like the same sites you talked about. I'll check them and see what's going on and, you know, see what's happening. And a lot of times there's a friend of mine, Chris Chesniak. He's like Encyclopedia Metallum, you know. It's like I'll go to him and be like, hey, and he'll be like, hey, check out this band. He's like, this you like, because a lot of times people send me stuff and I'm kind of just on a different head space in a way. Like I'm still listening to like the old stuff, and I'm going back into like old Miles Davis stuff, and I've been listening to a lot of that and getting a lot of takeaways that aren't necessarily jazz, but it's spinning things for me in another way, even on heavy music. Everything I write ends up being heavy. Like I almost can't write not heavy.
Yeah.
It's like everything I write is going to be heavy because that's what kind of does it for me. And that's how it comes out for me. You know, it always comes out like pissed off. It's always something's angry. Even if I'm not, you know, there's always something pissed off about it. But there's like bands like, you know, I don't really follow tons of new bands, you know, I'll say.
Are you catching a couple of gigs as like Starland Ballroom? Obviously, that was our local, and like, you know,
yeah, that's real close to me.
Yes, that's a great spot. So, you catching anybody if they come through town?
I haven't really. No, I haven't really. I was going to go see Seven Dust with a friend of mine because he was just to kind of have like a night out. It was sold out. Like, you know, when we got there, not when we got there, like the day before. He's like, I looked into it. He's like, oh, it's sold out. You know, and I was like, shit, you know, but so we just hung out.
Next time, yeah.
Yeah, we just got together to hang out anyway. But it was, but no, I haven't really been going to shows. I've been pretty lame.
Yeah.
I've been like in my own head and working on my own stuff here. Yeah. Like, you know, the stuff you can't see to my left and right, like the studio. I've been really digging into that, you know, and doing a lot of weird shit. You know, the new stuff I'm working on is heavy, but it's gonna be a little weird. You know, I think might be an acquired taste, but it's I think it's got its thing going and it's got its groove going, but a lot of weird instrumentation. Like I'm just kind of like I'm doing whatever I want, you know, and it's pretty cool. I'll shoot you an MP3 or something when it's presentable, just so you can check it out. I trust you. I know you won't post it anywhere.
Appreciate that.
So, yeah, I mean, Eric, you know, just, you know, going back to Brooklyn, you know, obviously, you know, that's a place that's obviously changed a lot over the years.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I lived there for a little bit myself in Greenpoint for a little while, and I went to Brooklyn College. So I'm really familiar with it. And, you know, it's become, I mean, especially for music. I mean, obviously, you know, you had L'Amour's back in the day. I mean, like I said, it was just a hotbed. Nowadays, you know, Brooklyn has become, though, a very hot spot again for rock and metal. You know, you got St. Vitus there. I mean, there's a huge scene there of a lot of like sort of more like traditional metal, doom metal. You know, it's always been known for doom metal, obviously, but really a lot of traditional metal now coming out of Brooklyn. I mean, like certain neighborhoods there that you would never even step foot in back in the day are like these posh neighborhoods now, like Bed-Stuy and everything. It's just crazy. It's crazy. But so, I mean, just in general, I mean, when you go back to Brooklyn, just even from just being a musician and growing up, I mean, playing and going to Lemore's and I mean, what do you see? I mean, is it sort of like a place that you're just like, I don't recognize this anymore? Is it like, wow, this is great what's happening here, especially with the music scene, like I said, that is coming out of Brooklyn. I mean, there's great bands. This band called Sanhedrin that's out of there. There's this band called Tower. That's a really good band.
Okay.
Yeah, just bands. If you want to check those out, those are just
Yeah,
two
yeah,
off the top
I'll
of my
check them
head.
out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, have you gone back and seen like the old neighborhood? I mean, I don't know what part of Brooklyn you're from, but
Yeah, Sheepshead Bay is where I was from.
Sheepshead
That's
Bay.
right.
Okay, so
Yeah.
okay, yeah. So that's the heart of it right there. So I mean, well, from the music perspective, I mean, that was such a great place for, I mean, rock and metal, like I said, in the 80s and 90s. It was just, I mean, porn, the bands coming out of the left and right, just a great scene. I
Yeah,
mean, grow. I mean, what do you ever get to go back there and reminisce or see, where Lemore's used to be or whatever, and just kind of, because I was told, I interviewed Kenny Hickey, last spring, and he was talking a little bit about that, that he lives, I know, in Staten Island now. He's not there anymore. But I mean, just when you go back down memory lane, and do you notice that there's is it do you think it's like lost, what it was in terms of its music, or is it good again? Just give us your take, because like I said, I'm not back there anymore. I can't, I live out in California now, so I don't see as much, but just give me your take on that, what you see.
Yeah,
right
I
now.
mean, it's different. I mean, it's cool that it's still got its own like scene going, even if it's not like, say, thrash or whatever, or the scene that I know,
Sure.
It's not I'm trying to think of like the best way to put it. It's, to me, I think it's really cool that it's still like a fertile ground for new stuff, because there are some really, even bands that aren't necessarily metal, that are coming out, and they're just bands that are heavy, like was it A Place to Bury Strangers, like that band?
Okay. I think, yeah, I've heard
Freaking,
of that.
it's like they're kind of like noise rock.
Yeah.
So there is still a real there's a thing, like, I think Henry Rollins put it like the best way. He said, like, on the East Coast, he's like, everybody's packed in. They're all on top of each other. They're all fucking in each other's way, and blah, 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 blah. He goes, that's why the music is so pissed off on the East Coast. He goes, then you go out to California. He goes, and you got girls on roller skates and bikinis. He goes, and sunshine and all that stuff. And he goes, and it's really hard to be pissed off. Like he would say.
Yeah. Weather's
so
nice,
there's something that's like a Brooklyn or like a New York thing. I still hear in newer bands that I do know of that are out of Brooklyn and the New York area. It's like there's that stylistic thread of that pissed offedness that's still there. So I think that's great. It's different than the scene I know, or I knew and grew up in, but it's still same in a lot of ways. Like, it's still, and it's just cool to see that, and there's still my friends, still playing. They're from Brooklyn, like Inhuman, still playing and kicking everybody's ass. The Last Stand, Max Penn still plays out every now and again. There's still, I mean, I know that
Biohazard just got back together too. They're
that's still happening.
Right.
And it's cool stuff. I just think it's, the Brooklyn sound is still alive, but it's evolved. It's turned into something else, but it's not a bad thing. It's still got that thread that I'm proud of, that angry, like in your face, pissed offedness, is what I call it. It's like, it always sounds something's, even if it's not totally over the top, obviously angry, there's like that anger right below the lid, like, right under the surface. That's always there, even in like bands that are more like an Interpolish, like that band Interpol, like a band like that. Like there's stuff, even those bands that come out of there there's still something edgy about it that I dig,
That's cool.
Not to ramble, but I'm trying to think of the best way to kind of explain what I'm getting at.
Well, no, and experience, like you said, how Henry Rollins said, I mean, you're talking about millions and millions of people living in this tiny little, geographically tiny spot. People are going to just be mad and angry because humans like their space, and there's not much space in New York City, bottom line, for all those people, so,
it's like you're almost always in a constant state of stress, even if you don't realize it.
Exactly.
I've talked to some people about that, and they're like, it's almost like, even the old lady who lived her whole life in Brooklyn, it's like at some point, like, she was always under, even though she's a smiley, happy old lady, it's like you learn to live with that constant stress, and it becomes normal. It's not even, it's a stress, but it's not like, it's not setting you off every day, but it puts you closer to getting set off.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because you're always in that, like,
Totally.
that's why I've when I was younger, and even still now, I could get pretty pissed off pretty quickly, but it's just, it's kind of ingrained in you, from growing up there,
Yeah, it is. And I've been I haven't lived in New York in over 20 years, and I still have that, so it doesn't go away. I'll just say that, right? It just doesn't. It doesn't leave you. Yeah. So I mean, Eric. So where can we send out? Because you've got all these different projects and everything. What's the best place where people can go? Check out all your projects. I mean, do you have like a place where they where there's like a one-stop spot for your stuff, or is it all individualized? Like what's the best way to people like let's just even we'll take, for instance, First Order. Where would be like, where could people go check out the First Order stuff for for that?
Yeah, they could pick it up from Faster and Louder Records.
Okay.
If they go on that site, it'll be probably like the second release down, because he just released something like last week. So we'll be right there. You could totally pick it up from them right there. He's got instructions on how you make the whole thing happen, the transaction and all that stuff. Yeah, that stuff's there. Most of it, because again, I'm not like actively chasing a lot of stuff, but I blab a lot about my stuff on Facebook, on my personal page, but I don't have like band pages and things like that. Right. I'm just kind of keeping it more, there is no one-stop shop, unfortunately, but I have like domain names that are just sitting right now, that once I have something, it'll pop up somewhere, and I can let everybody know that way. But no, there's nothing right now that's a one-stop shop.
Okay. Very well.
Right. I'm real professional.
So the best place to would maybe go to your Facebook page or something, right? People could check out what you got going on, right? Okay.
Yeah. Because I blab on there. I mean, I put stuff about my dog and my family on there too. So it's real normal. There's some pedestrian stuff on there, and then there's some creative stuff on there.
Yeah, that's all right.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah,
makes me more like, some people have said, it's like, no, you're more human that way, and people kind of gravitate towards that.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, wow, his son made honor roll.
Yeah, of course.
Shit like that. And then I'm like, hey, got a nasty project coming out. Go check this out. Then it's, here's a picture of my dog. The next day.
I got to tell you, Eric, normally when we do interviews, they're probably 30, 35 minutes-ish. Like we're 46, 47 minutes in. We could go for another hour. But, just on behalf of Matt and I, just, thank you for being part of the show tonight. I knew this was going to be a hit, because when I spoke to Matt, going back, a couple of weeks ago, I said, I want to have Eric on. And then we did our own research. And I said, no research you need to do. This is just a good guy. Get him on. Let's do it. Let's talk. And it's happened. So, thanks for being here, for being part of Aftershocks TV. It's just an honor to have you here, buddy. And I can say I had a beer with this gentleman here. So it's all cool.
Yes,
all good.
Indeed. No, thank you guys so much for having me. I really appreciate it. It's really nice of you to have me on, and let me kind of spread the word a little bit, about stuff that's cooking.
Yeah.